So it was just announced that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are the new president and vice president of the United States. But if you're like me, you have a bit of skepticism. So let's talk about that. For some reason, when I first saw the news, my stomach didn't immediately drop like in 2016. It almost was like I was reading something that wasn't there. It felt like very dissociative. And I'll tell you why. Logically, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm going to break down the points of this. One, the red mirage and blue shift. We saw this in 2020, which is why I was very confused last night when everyone was freaking out, because to me, it seemed like it was obvious. It's going to look like Trump wins, and then after a while, it's going to look like Kamala's winning, and then we'll actually find out the results. That didn't happen. It was very quick. It was very easy. And that's not how this election has been periodically, this election season. This brings me to my next point, which is mail-in ballots. Before the post offices were even open, they announced the win. But I don't understand that, because in a lot of states, you can submit your mail-in ballots as late as day of. And so how would they have time to count this? Which brings to my next point, days to count this. In 2020, it took close to a week for them to announce the election. And while I believe technology has advanced and they've had more time to prep themselves over the last 4 years, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. That brings me to my next point, which is the fact that not a lot of people were voting for Trump necessarily. Like, obviously, there's a decent amount of his cult following. But at the same time, a lot of non-committed voters, especially in swing states, showed more of a lean towards Kamala Harris. And obviously, this information could be falsified and no one knows except you in the booth, but I digress. And lastly, the astrology of it all. So many astrologers, so many spiritualists have stated, and myself included, that intuitively it didn't feel like Trump was winning. And if anything, the astrologers stated that it wouldn't be an easy election season. And it showed that for them, I'm not stating for myself, that Kamala was going to win, but there was going to be some pushback, like it wasn't going to be like easy peasy. And lastly, they have until December if they want to recount before they can announce officially the election if they wanted to. That all being said, I'm not some delusional optimist. I'm not a person who lives in denial. So if Trump wins, if he did win, if he is the president, I'm going to do what any good activist and abolitionist does, which is get to work. Regardless of who's in office, the action doesn't start or end there. Doesn't start or end in the ballot, doesn't start or end in the booth. And so take the time to accept it, acknowledge it, feel it, and use it to empower you and those around you. Hopefully this video gave you some peace of mind and some direction of why you might feel unsettled or filled with skepticism.